Afade, my name is Ryan, and this is Data Points. And today we're going to speak with Dr. Robert Underwood. And I asked Dr. Underwood to come on because Bobby Shringy said something during our podcast, and he talked about plebiscite and people not understanding the bargain they'd be signing up for, and how fear was a part of that. And so I started thinking about like who I can go referentially to get the story on that. So naturally, Dr. Underwood has been a congressman for decades. He was the president of the University of Guam, and now he's leading the think tank, the Pacific Center for Island Security. And in that, I've been seeing a lot of his articles about what's happening now with the buildup and who's speaking for the locals. And he's not the only voice on this, but he's the voice along with Ginger Cruz, who asked the question, where are the bomb shelters for us? And that got me thinking, because there's no bomb shelters here, but there sure are a lot of missiles pointed at us. So I thought it'd be interesting for you to hear his perspective and his take as to why things are the way they are here, the power structures, the missile defense, the regional security, and the notions behind it. I think you'll value this conversation, and I hope you value all our conversations and take the opportunity to look at them. We're on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and we appreciate you for listening, and we appreciate you for joining us here today. Hafade, welcome to Data Points. My name is Ryan, and I'm your host, and I'm here with Dr. Robert Underwood. Welcome, Dr. Underwood.
Well, thank you very much, Ryan. It's a pleasure to be here.
I asked Dr. Underwood here because he's sat in every seat in leadership, in education, well, respectively. I mean, he's been in Congress. You've been the president of the university, and now you are leading the Pacific Center for Island Security. And you were the voice that I hear most persistently and constantly advocating for Guam and the region, respective to all the money coming our way. So the question I want to ask you in terms of where we are today, having sat where you've sat and witnessed this journey, are we in a better position? Are we in a worse position? Are we in any kind of position where we can move the needle in any way for ourselves?
I think we're in the same position we've always been in, which is kind of a call for leadership and a call for a bold vision of the future. And so that necessitates two things. One is that we need to understand who we are as a people, and that speaks to questions of identity. And then we think about our options. So as we kind of traverse those two elements, we go through a whole series of political changes and different things that are going on around us. But at its base, those are the two things that kind of call to us in order to understand our future, and as well as our past. And I don't believe that we've done a good as job as that as we should have. Particularly for those people, as you've outlined, I've been in leadership, not only in political leadership, but educational leadership.
One of the things I've been reading is the biography of Governor Berdalio. And one of the things I just started reading it, but in the early stages, talking about the Organic Act and the formation of Guam's political identity and will. Can you talk to me narratively and historically about that? Because I think there's a lot of people who just don't even understand how we got to this place.
Yeah. Well, obviously, there's a long history of colonialism. Mm-hmm. And so that history goes back to the 1600s when the missionary Salvatore decided to live here and conduct his work here, which then created the system of Spanish colonialism as motivated and as managed via Mexico in the 18th century and via the Philippines in the 19th century. So there's a lot of things going on at that time period.
Sure.
And I think one of the things that people don't really understand is by the time the 1900 rolled around, the Chamorros, particularly the leadership, was pretty sophisticated group of leaders.
Okay.
And then the Americans came, and then we had a different kind of colonialism. In many ways, more attentive to infrastructure and roads and things like that, but totally absent on political development
Okay.
and not encouraging that. So these leaders who came out of the World War II experience, you know, assumed that because they suffered for the United States during World War II, that they were sort of owed some respect, level of respect, and political progress, and that motivated the political status movement at that time, which was all aimed at U.S. citizenship.
Okay.
They were operating under the assumption that all the uncomfortable things that were going on, like land takings and the military taking over half the land and just moving people around, that this wouldn't happen if they were U.S. citizens. Well, it still would have happened if they were U.S. citizens, but they assumed that. So they needed to kind of invest that whole organic effort towards that.
I see.
And that's exactly what they did. So then after that, it reached kind of a level of stability. Then you try to figure out, are you going to make incremental progress, or are you going to make some kind of dramatic move into some entirely different political status? And I think the political leadership in general in Guam has been basically conservative, and they just wanted to take a sure, more slower path. And so they were satisfied with incremental changes rather than some kind of new, bold vision.
There's a lot to unpack in what you just said.
That's
there.
right. Sure.
Because you moved over hundreds of years of identity, and one of the things that I've noticed is the idea that people look externally for solutions rather than internally. And that's pervasive. And I hearken that back to like colonial body memory to a degree, because okay, Magellan comes over, you kill the leaders in a lot of ways, or anyone who doesn't align. And then those who do, through a system, a new economic system, or a new system of ideas that's introduced, you become more prolific as a function of you going along. You get access to all these things that allow you to increase your status and increase your opportunity with this wealth that's coming as a function of all these visitors coming to your land. Is that a fair statement?
It's a fair statement, and of course, it's that view that you can become wealthier, you can acquire largesse and some kind of incremental political progress by cooperating with the people who have established the system for you. So you're constantly not just in your words, body memory, but reflexively. Every time there's a problem here on Guam, people say, call in the feds, as if the feds were the solution. Right. No, they're a big part of the problem. And that's reflexive nature that somehow or other, if we call in Uncle Sam, he's going to fix it for us. He's going to fix all the malfeasance that we see around us, even though some of the malfeasance is based on Uncle Sam's authority. So that notion is really embedded in the way we talk, in the way we act, in our memory of our political past. So that level of cooperation, and so today, you still have people running for office who are thinking, I can get you a better deal with Uncle Sam because I know how to cooperate with him better. Not I can challenge him better, but I know how to cooperate. Versus another political candidate says, no, I have the keys to cooperate with the feds. And another candidate says, no, I have better keys. I have better relationships. But I don't see any of them saying, no, this relationship sucks. This relationship is not empowering. Let's figure a way to change it. I think it's, it's at base, like, how do you see yourself? What is your identity? So, there was a friend of mine, historian, a long time at the University of Guam, says, well, Guam is like a kept woman. She's not going to get married because the guy won't marry her. But he keeps her in a nice apartment, and he continues to give her money as long as she says, she'll cooperate on things, because she's being ultimately used for some other purpose. And that's, in a sense, where we're at. So we're not going to become a state. I mean, anybody who argues that we're going to become a state is in dreamland. It's
Yeah.
in total fantasy. We're not going to become a state. So if you understood that, then you move to the next level. Well, what can we become? But what people will say sometimes, in order to hedge their bets, well, I want to ask for statehood so they can reject it.
Okay.
Then I'll try something else.
Mhm.
No, you're waiting. What? How many more rejection notice do you need? Every time you move, they tell you, no, you can't do this. What big rejection? And they're not going to give you a rejection notice like that.
No, it's funny because we're in this space of EQ now, emotional intelligence.
Right.
And there's this notion of you buying the story that you want to sell to yourself, or you telling the story that you want to tell. And then also you not receiving the story that's being signed, sealed, and delivered to you. You're not seeing the writing on the wall because you're so insistent on telling the story that you want to tell. And part of that story could be to maintain the power structures, to maintain the go along, because in the collaboration there is safety and there is advancement, because the squeaky wheel, doesn't always get the grease. Sometimes the squeaky wheel gets replaced.
Well, so like, are you comfortable with your identity as the tip of the spear?
Okay.
Are you comfortable with your identity as being the most useful piece of geography, in the surrounding 3,000 miles? Is that what you're comfortable with? And because if you are, then that's what you'll always be. If you want to be something else, then you have to think of, well, how can I use this for my purposes? Not how can I cooperate with the people who want to use it for these purposes, expecting that I'm going to get more. And so this is kind of the nature of political rhetoric on Guam goes something like this.
Right.
In the After the Organic Act, it's always been we suffered for the United States. We should get something for suffering for them. We suffered during World, and they did. We did suffer in World War II. So we should get something. Then when it doesn't come, then you say, well, we're important militarily, so therefore we should get something for this. And what is that something? And what is that something in structural terms? Not in an appropriation, or not in a project, but in structural terms. And so that obviously the Commonwealth movement was in a step in that direction, and that floundered. And so now we're kind of faced with, well, what can we do?
Well, it's okay. So what can we do? Because there's a sense, I would think there's a genuine sense of apathy and powerlessness that exists here, because we go back to that body memory.
Right.
The ones who fight get smashed, get pushed away, get pushed aside, or get ostracized from the power structure, or eliminated. And Governor Bradalio likened it to, he in the book, he talked about how the feds would assassinate people, like,
Right.
but he, before it was like taking out what's his name, Castro,
Right.
but now they politically assassinate you, right? And there's a lot of different ways they take you out. So that's kind of the structure.
Well, it's you hit it when you say that people feel disempowered.
Yes.
Or they feel resignation. So if you have this kind of conversation, people will say, yeah, you're right, but what can I do about it? I can't do anything about it. So that resignation, is a point for the power structure. So now, well, how do you change that attitude?
But you're in this groundswell where the power structure is deporting people and sending them off to Guatemala,
Yeah.
and invading nation states, and like, I would think the notion of powerlessness is more pervasive now than ever.
Absolutely. So who's speaking out? So there's people speaking out in the States, but who's speaking out here?
Exactly.
Who is challenging the things?
But the
so
idea,
like Ricky had one good thing that he did, because he has a whole another part of his
I
biography,
understand.
which he has,
Yes, I understand. Yes.
but he had a great attitude.
Mm.
He had a great attitude, an attitude that we ought to adopt, and that is that when a governor goes to Washington D.C., every governor goes to Washington D.C. once or twice a year, and they come back. They want to announce projects.
Mm-hmm.
I got this. I got that. I got this. And in one of these events, Governor Bordallo was explaining, I got this, I got that, and a reporter asked him, Governor, when you go to Washington, aren't you tired of going there begging? He goes, when I go to Washington, I don't go begging, I go collecting. Now, that's an attitudinal difference.
Agreed.
And so, who has that attitude?
Fair enough.
Yeah. And so, even if you were able to do that, if you're able to do that, you kind of alter people's sense of options and possibilities, because there is even though the options are defined as statehood, free association, and independence, as if those were immutable. There really are other possibilities along the way. There's changes in federal law. Who is creatively sitting down and saying, how can we change federal law as it applies to military activities in Guam?
Sure.
How can we do that? And which of the candidates that are running for delegate are going to do that?
But we talk about that, right? Mindset and willpower, right? And that's, are we willing to back up the things that we say we want? Are we willing to fight for the things that we say we want? And I think the answer is no. And I think for too long, we've been of that mindset, that external seeking, solve my problem, versus I'm going to solve my problem. This is how you're going to help me. And I come with a plan, and that's the plan. And I think what's happening is we're not thinking of the plan in a way that will bring about meaningful change. We're thinking about the plan in a collaborative way, in a way that just gets us along until they're done with us. They, right, the powers that be, are done with us and decide to move on to the next.
Well, everything is externalized. Everything. Your mindset, your decision-making authority, even your planning, even your vision, even your dreams.
Right.
All of a sudden become externalized. Like, how can I envision a Guam without the United States? Oh, I can't. So therefore, I'm not going to engage in that. So that is the ultimate expression of a colonial mindset. Now, that's easy to say. I mean, some people just take it, oh, that's just an intellectual kind of trick of the trade, verbal trick. But in reality, it does affect everything we do. And almost every aspect of government activity, local government activity, almost every aspect of economic activity, it's like you go through the check marks, and the first thing you have to check is, what are the feds going to do, and what do they think of this? And that ultimately then is disempowering, but we become comfortable because we think, well, we'll get some benefit out of this. And in reality, you're just in a kind of a treadmill, so that the political issues are the same ones over and over and over again, and which there is a precious little vision that is presented.
And that's the notion of the matrix, that you're in a simulation, because we are in a simulation that's self-imposed by a larger power. Okay, this is the context. Like an ant on a piece of paper, you draw a circle or a square around it, it'll stay within the confines of that square. And then you incentivize the ant to operate within these confines, versus the ant can just cross over the line and just walk over, and all the little ants can come join them on the square, or like externally of the square.
So those ants are talking to each other with their antennae and saying, stay here, stay here. No, but I mean, it's a useful metaphor, because that's exactly what we're experiencing. So the effort on the Commission on Decolonization, Commission on Self-Determination, and all of those things are designed to help create visions. But interestingly, the politician reaction to those activities are to support the activity but not take a stand. That's always the issue.
Fair.
So that's of course I support this activity, but well, what is it that you want to see happen? Well, we'll let the people decide. And so what happens is that there's a kind of a convenient escape hatch for political leaders to avoid actually exerting political leadership.
What do you think? Do you think they're avoiding the question because you risk alienating a large portion of your constituents when you get into the idea of racism in
Of course,
terms
of
of
course, of
right?
course you do.
Okay.
Of course you run that risk.
Mhm.
But that's what you're supposed to be about. You're supposed to articulate. You can't say, I'm for a bold new future, but not offer a bold vision
Fair.
or not offer anything that everything you do will have some inherent estimation, some inherent dimension of divisiveness because people's perceptions of themselves and their identity is immersed in their immediate surroundings. So you have lots of people walking around this island who are looking at the island and thinking, this is my tomorrow pass. I've been here for almost 4,000 years. And then you have other people walking around the island who say, you know, my father brought me here 30 years ago, and this is where I'm going to die.
Mm.
And so or I immigrated here, or I'm here temporarily from the FSM. Whatever their personal traction is, there's no one providing a coherent vision that says, look, the system we have is not working the way that we are being empowered as a political entity.
Fair. So to your point, doesn't matter who's making the decision. There's no vision aligned with the decision to be made other than to continue with the status quo.
That's right. That's so. So everybody, wants everybody. It goes back to it's almost a caricature of itself. The first political status election was in 1976.
Okay.
And they had like 8 options. I mean, there were a lot of different options, including being a county in Hawaii, I believe. And some people actually wanted to be a county in Hawaii. But the one that won was 51% voted for status quo with improvements. Well, then I said, well, who would and who doesn't want? I just want the same thing, only a little bit better. Well, obviously, that is not a vision.
Okay.
It's not changing the system. And so essentially, that option is still the winning option today, especially in the political class.
And so by waking up every day and doing the same thing that we do every day, we effectively assent to that system.
Well, you assent to it and you limit yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's the part that's disturbing because you're limiting yourself. Can you imagine if you really empowered people to say, well, what would your vision be for education if you really had maximum control? Or what would your vision be for the political structure? Not advertise the people of Guam are joining the military in exceptional numbers. Therefore what?
Yeah.
Therefore, the military owes us something.
Right.
Are they going to give you something? Or are they going to give you credit? Or as opposed to, this, because we're joining the military in such large numbers, we think the relationship with the military should be like this, and it should be encoded in law. That's different.
Well, I think this becomes a discussion too about economics, right? There are some people who can operate from a place of fear and safety, and some people who cannot. Some people who can inherently or feel empowered to speak up, and those who inherently do not.
Well, you speak to risk takers.
Yeah.
So that's what you want. You want entrepreneurship. There's all kinds of entrepreneurship, except in politics. So you're being from the private sector. You're encouraging everybody should have a multiplicity of ideas for a new kind of economy, but not in politics. Well, it's another social activity which needs to be energized by that.
I guess where I'm at, and the reason why we're having this conversation is because I see all these ideas for change, and I see them swirling around, and everyone's asking the right questions, and everybody seems to kind of know what the answer is, but at the end of the day, I don't really. What's going to be different, do you think? And what can we be empowered to make different? And how do we do that?
Well, okay. So let's say, all right, you have political opportunities. You have the opportunity to elect a different delegate. You have opportunity for a different kind of gubernatorial. You have an opportunity for a different legislature. So think about it. This is the latest example. Everybody was upset that they were going to declare 33 million acres available for deep seabed mining.
Mhm.
So they offered it up, and both almost universal opposition from Guam and the Northern Marianas. The final ruling doubled the amount.
Right.
So now, what can you do? You can say, "Oh, wow, there's nothing I can do." Well, you have the legislature. They can pass legislation saying we're not going to cooperate with this. We're not going to allow the port to be used for this. Whatever you have, whatever little power you have, and it's an opportunity to collaborate with the CNMI to go along the same lines. But that seems harder than to just say, "I did my part. I said that it was wrong, but now it's going to happen."
Can I speak to you about like structure though? Because one of the reasons I started talking about plebiscite and changing the political structure is because of the way the legislature is set up. So the legislature frustrates me because each of the senators is effectively a free agent and they become aggregated to support any issue without any accountability to any real constituency other than the people of Guam. But so you have these 15 people who can stack in any different way and be loyal to donors and funders and the political apparatus in a variety of different ways that almost contributes to the lack of the ability to do anything because of who does a senator answer to at the end of the day? Because in say Congress you have districting, right? So there's a district you're accountable to, and you whatever you don't do for this district that comes due.
Yeah.
So how can we make that work here better?
Well, they tried districting a few years ago, a couple of decades ago, and it didn't work out well because it was too hard to determine the districts.
Well, you get into a fight because it's a political fight
that's right.
because it's who's
But-
going to win.
Yeah, and so then you also had for example, Santa Rita and Sumai.
Okay.
The numbers would be boosted because you have to count the people who live on a naval station.
Okay.
But they don't vote, and they're not likely to vote. So you had all of these things at work. Well, there has to be a different. I'm not sure what the electoral system should be, but the at-large voting in Guam is the most understudied but most important political phenomenon on the island. You've touched on something because people don't kind of understand that. It's in general, it's like a popularity contest.
Yes.
And so the popularity contest doesn't force you to articulate differences. It forces you to develop strategies to be more popular.
And I don't vote all the way down the line because if you vote all the way down the line, it's counterproductive because you're taking away votes from the people that you really want to make.
That's right. Well, yeah. So that element of voting needs to be analyzed. So here, for example, I don't, it's like you're divulging how you vote, but you're that average voter who's paying attention. They got 15 votes. After about 5 or 6, you're really stretching it because, wow, I don't know. And so that element of voting has to be reanalyzed in terms of weighted voting. Maybe try to do weighted voting, or try to so that it would force more issues to the surface.
I would say because, again, it's counterproductive because if you really want one person to get in and you vote for someone and the person
You dilute that vote.
you dilute it.
Yeah.
So and that's a learned strategy. There's all kinds of other strategies going on.
And of course, also running for a political party is almost nonsensical because you're really running against everybody else, even people in your own party. So, vote all Democrat or vote all Republican. Well, that's ridiculous because you're really running against everybody and you're hoping, that you get a lot of bullet votes.
And then the primary system there's all kinds of funky stuff that we do here that we don't necessarily have to do, but it's almost like it's the pomp and circumstance to make us feel official.
Yeah, right.
And so we've embodied that and perpetuated that. It was like, and so one of my favorite stories is the ham story where, I'll tell it like non-binary, parent to child explaining, why they cut the end off a ham before they put it in the pan.
Uh-huh.
And referentially, they say, well, that's what my grandmother did or grandfather did, and great grandfather, grandpa. And then we find out great grandpa and grandma just did it because the pan was too small.
Yeah.
So I had to cut the end off the ham to fit it in the pan. But I perpetuated this this story that I was telling myself.
Self-limiting. You're limiting yourself. You're limiting yourself.
It's the pen line on the paper.
Yeah.
And I want to get to that place. And this is why I asked you on, because tell us what that looks like. Tell me, tell the person who is a middle manager, white collar, contemplating moving.
Mm-hmm.
Why should I care what happens here, and what should happen here moving forward that would make me want to stay? And if I vote for self-determination, what does that look like in my life? How does my life change? How does my safety and security, if the US goes away, is China going to come in and just like come in, and am I on Temu and speaking Chinese? Would that be worse? I don't know.
No, it could be better. You never know.
Yeah, I don't know.
But the issue is, of course, is to have a competing vision.
Okay.
But you don't have competing visions because everyone starts with the assumption that they really can't generate their own power, and that when they are able to generate their own power, then someone else is going to move in. So I've been to these EITC events where the military explaining things, and I'm talking to some of these military officers, and they always end up saying, "Do you want to speak Chinese?" I said, I'm sorry, that's just really a lame argument. That's a lame argument because you know why we're speaking English? you know why is it that we're speaking English now? Is because a dominant political power came in. So that's not the argument. The argument is, how do we empower ourselves? And so for just the average person, if it's framed as an issue of security and stability, then they're never going to take a risk. So this is really about entrepreneurship, not just in business, but entrepreneurship in political ideas. So I have yet to see any political candidate come up with a different vision, other than to say, I support the process of self-determination, which I do as well. But, in the absence of that, doesn't mean you can't propose different kinds of fixes to the electoral system. Doesn't mean you can't propose legislation that will shape federal territorial relations. Because the thing about being an unincorporated territory is that the flip side of it is, of course, the feds can do anything they want to you, but the feds can let you do anything you want to do in a way that a state can't do. So how do you sit around and imagine that? But like I said, so that political entrepreneurship also has to be based on a sense of identity. How do you identify with Guam? How do people identify with Guam? What does the term Guamanian mean? What does the term Chamorro mean? Yeah. What does the term Guam resident mean? All of those things as they interplay in this conversation, and that's a serious issue because people are going in different directions. So, and it's a moment of truth for each individual person. I'm not here as a U.S. citizen. I'm not here as an American. I have to figure out, I'm not here as a Micronesian. I'm not here as a Filipino immigrant. I'm here now, and this is Guam. What do I mean to this place? Not what I brought with me, but what do I mean to this place? How am I going to help reshape it in collaboration with the people who have been here thousands of years? Mm. That's not an easy thing. It's not an easy, but it's a moment of truth people have to come to.
Yeah, and maybe we're just not there yet.
We're not there. Of course, I've been trying to push that issue for decades, and in my time in Congress, you have there's a whole history of things that I did that people don't know, and things that I failed to do that people don't know. because it's a kind of a tough environment. But there were moments of truth. There were moments of truth when I sat there on the floor. I'll give you one example. The legislation that gave Guam the right of first refusal for the return of excess lands. Guam is the only place that can do that.
Right.
Now, when I was moving that through, the Department of Defense was against it. They sent over attorneys, everything. And then I finally, with cooperation of some Republicans, we were able to get it to the floor. When I got to the floor, the Clinton administration, ostensibly my home team, issued what they call a statement of administration position. Do not vote for this legislation because the president will veto it. Now, they make those idle threats all the time. But so then that's the moment of truth. So I'm sitting there and I'm going, well, the people who are running, there are people who run the floor action, both on the Republican and Democrat side. They came to me, do you want to pull the bill and try it later? No, let's do it. Well, we got the bill through.
Right.
Yeah. So that was a kind of like a moment of truth, and the Clinton administration ended up doing nothing. But the military had the last laugh.
How so?
They refused to access any more lands. Now, I hadn't considered that. So because they were ready to access lands, but then when I came, since then they haven't, and they've been sort of misrepresenting what that bill was. So there are moments like that in every elected official's life, but what gets you to that point, is like really you have to think back to who you are, the people you represent, what your parents told you, a whole kind of panoply of things, what you learned in political science and everything else. But for Guam, that identity piece is not well set.
No, so what you just said kind of brought it all together in what you've been saying over the last, thematically over the last couple of minutes, is the idea that on this journey, you came to a place where there was an expected outcome and there was a showdown, and the expected outcome was you
lose
back down, but you stood astride, you stood in the face of that, and they blinked. Yeah. And the outcome wasn't what was the expected. The outcome was what was wanted, but it would never have happened if you didn't stand up in that moment.
That's right.
And I think that is something that has been inside me and inside the things that I've been reading, because one of my favorite books I talk about, I've probably referenced it at least 3 times here, is On the Edge, this guy Nate Silver, and he talks about game theory. And he talks about how in different iterations of poker hands, there's things that you were supposed to do probabilistically to guarantee outcomes, right? There's a 70% chance on a straight flush you do X, Y, Z. And you do that repetitively because you play the law of averages. But he says every once in a while, you have to do something that is, you got to zag when conventional wisdom tells you to zig, because if you don't do that you'll never realize the potential outcome that would have realized in the face of that. Or you might get smashed into oblivion, right? But that's the idea. You take the shot.
Yeah.
Shoot your shot, right? And I think if you want to talk about something that's culturally pervasive right now, it's shoot your shot. And then that notion of entrepreneurism and disruption, because nothing's working for a lot of people now. The power structure for the boomers is kind of like eroding and coming down, but they're still in power and entrenched and still making decisions and still informing decisions that the next generation is going to pay for. But the next generation, their problem is they don't show up to vote here. And but the problem is too, it's like they're not educated. They don't understand plebiscite. They don't understand these issues because it's the education system not doing their job.
Well, yeah, and of course you have a kind of a communication structure, a media structure that rewards avoiding those issues.
Yeah.
So
we're all in the dark.
No, I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to, I don't want to. So
I don't want to ruffle any feathers.
Yeah,
I don't want to be affected.
Yeah.
I don't want my job threatened because I work for the government. Right. I don't want to be.
So there's all of that. But at its base, I would have to say I'm more optimistic now than I have been in the past.
Right.
Because of individuals like yourself or podcasts like this, where you see people are actually grappling with serious issues.
Because the pain point is too high.
Yeah.
It's too bad for everyone to continue. And I that's why everyone's talking. There's so many talking heads now talking about what's wrong and asking for solutions, but they're not necessarily asking the right questions. Not to say that I am, but I'm on a thread here. I want to see like how we can get better and like what's preventing us from getting better and having an honest conversation. I liken it to like a sports conversation. You just hired the new coach. You pay $5 million a year for him. The first year it's really bad. Okay, well, let's move on.
Yeah.
Let's pivot. And I think we're at a time in place where we can see data coming in that tells the story. So there's no lying to ourselves. It's on the wall. The only lying to ourselves is the story we choose to continue telling ourselves. So as a function of that, you said there's no competing vision. What you're head of the Pacific Island, the Pacific Center for Island Security. One of the things that that made me think that you said was, where are the bomb shelters for the Chamorros? Where are the bomb shelters for the locals? I'm sure there's a lot of like evacuation plans to the bunkers in New Zealand for people here, but I haven't heard. Do you?
Well, yeah, no. You know? I mean, it's pretty obvious that if and the whole reason for all this military activity is ostensibly we're going to be attacked by the Guam killer missile. So therefore, we set up this missile defense system, which you can see in the Middle East doesn't work quite as well as it's supposed to. And then that system and all the wargaming, and so that's what we're trying to explore, to explain to people. People wargame this. And then I'll tell you what the people who do the war games are telling us, and we'll track the things. And so we're hoping that it actually gets people to be the argument on the military on the military buildup used to be, are you for the military or against the military? Mm-hmm. Now I'm hoping that PCIS and other critical voices have changed that. Is this good for Guam or bad for Guam? Okay. And so that's that. So in order to move that, because the folks up at Nimitz Hill have all PCIS is 3 people working on a part-time basis. They got people up there, all kinds of officers, and their careers depend upon it. And they got thinkers, and they got probably 20, 30 people.
They have Anthropic. They have Palantir. They're good.
They have all of this working, and we're supposed to kind of balance that out. But it's not like we're being anti-military. It's like we're trying to force people to think you don't have to believe everything they say.
Right.
And you don't have to accept it. And you have a right to protect yourself. You don't, they want to use you as a target. So in this wargaming, if China attacks, then the missile defense system will hold it off temporarily while they move all their assets to Yap or Tinian or other places. But in the meantime, Guam is eviscerated. So now that you know that, now that you know that's what they're planning to do, now what do you think should be like some priorities? Well, one is shelters, so that we have some place to go in case of an attack. The other is, what are the disruptions they're creating? Housing, which is in your area. They're creating a lot of disruptions in the housing market. And their solution is to throw more people into the local economy, which I don't think is a solution. And, then they're kind of like ignoring all the kinds of issues and disjunctures that they're creating. They just finished spending $8 billion, $6 to $8 billion to build Camp Blas in anticipation for 5,000 Marines moving here. And today they have 150 Marines there.
Right.
And so it's like these people are not infallible. Mm-hmm. They're not exactly on their A game in planning, because there's a whole lot of moving parts. So you don't have to accept them, and you have to stand up for yourself. So what is the vision? What is the program, the legislative program that you are going to articulate in order to protect yourself and insulate yourself. And also, when are you going to draw the line? So they always say, I'm going to exert leverage. The military buildup. So you have political people say, I'm going to exert leverage on our behalf. Well, how do you exert that leverage? What does it mean?
What leverage?
Yeah, what leverage? And well, if your leverage is to say no, when are you going to say no? You haven't even said no. You just said maybe, I'm bothered by this and this and that, but you haven't said no. So tell me how you're going to exert leverage. And so that's our role. So we've been thinking about that too. So now we're thinking of issuing a report. What would be the optimum relationship with the military?
Understood.
And so that's also a think tank effort. But we're engaging different people from throughout Micronesia with that. So we'll see how that works out. And that report might come out in 6 to 9 months.
And I think those kinds of studies are important. And one of the things that we do is we lead with data. So with the organizations that we started, we've really noticed that there's no real data transparency, and that leads to a lack of accountability. And I think that is one of the things that we need to educate ourselves in, is in how to ask the right questions.
You can go to our website. Anyone can go to our website, pacificcenterforislandsecurity.com, and go to the Micronesian Monitor. And you can see all the ship movements that are working around us.
Okay.
From different countries. You can see all the military exercises. You can see the Chinese ships going up and down, and research vessels, quote, research vessels.
Mhm.
And, you can see the whole lay of the land, because we believe that information and data is power. But sometimes, data points, sometimes you have to point to the data. it's not just articulating the points.
Fair
We
enough.
have to point. This is the data that you should be looking at.
Agreed.
So we're providing our best efforts. So that monitor, that map exercise, is updated regularly and is used, interestingly, by a lot of think tanks around the world. But because we're tracking who uses it,
Mhm.
but its use on Guam is pretty minimal,
Right.
except probably on Nimitz Hill.
But so what other types of data do you need to kind of help you inform your strategy that you don't have access to now?
Well, I think the kind of economic data about the impact on housing. I think that and also the value of military investment.
Mhm.
How does that really work, and how does contracting work? How does procurement work? Because if you try to get them to say, you should use Guam businesses more, they'll say, "Oh no, we can't do that. We're not playing favorites."
Mhm.
Which is not absolutely true.
But
But but so in order to carry that out, you have to have elected officials apply direct pressure consistently, and they will yield.
yeah.
They will yield. But if they're not applying it, then the economic value of that investment is minimal.
How sophisticated do you think we can be with like carve outs, like favorable banking regulations or
Well, we
things?
haven't tried it.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah.
So
No, but
if you said what is the economic agenda for Guam,
Mhm.
the economic agenda for Guam cannot be we're just going to accept military spending and hope it does us some good. You have to figure out what are the points upon which you can change the way that business is conducted in Guam,
Yes, sir.
and also the federal relationships.
How do you think we should participate regionally? Because that's one of the things that you've said, right? We should negotiate like as a region, but I wouldn't that be hard to do?
Well, it is very hard to do, but it's attempted. You have the Micronesian Island Forum,
Mhm.
which they're meeting in July in Pohnpei. So, we try to participate in that. You have those opportunities. So the issue there is that Guam is like Guam is like the metropole. It's like New York City for the region.
Mhm.
Okay, so. Ironically, it's in the strongest transportation, economic, healthcare network in the region. but it is politically the weakest.
Guam is.
Guam is
Mm.
in comparison to working with the federal government. CNMI has a little bit more clout. Of course, the freely associated states have a whole different thing.
Right. They've negotiated their own
Yeah.
deal.
So how do you get that to work together? Again, is through the Micronesian Island Forum. But when they get together, what are they talking about? Are they talking about real economic strategies, or are they just talking about whining about United, which everybody whines about United, or whine about the Jones Act or Matson or somebody? They're all everybody just gets together to kind of whine about it,
Sure.
but not really develop an alternative plan. That needs think tank attention. That needs scholarship. That needs also some bold visions coming from people in the entrepreneurial section.
Agreed.
But so what is it going to cost the Guam legislature to create that study? They can spend, I don't want to get political, but they just spent $200,000 on a useless contract, and now they've rescinded it. So now what would it cost them to spend $500,000 on a legitimate?
Oh, Dr. Underwood, who studies anything? Who studies anything? Like you look at these bills, right? When they're doing economic analysis, who's doing the economic? Because I read through some of these economic
somebody
analysis.
is being paid $10 an hour.
I think that's a real statement, though.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Somebody in their 20s.
Right. And so, but how are they deriving these economic impacts that when they're evaluating these bills?
Well, they don't. If they were serious about it, and it doesn't work all that well in Congress, but in Congress they have an independent arm that does it.
Right.
Yeah,
the office, what's it called?
Well, they have the Congressional Budget Office.
Budget Office, right? And they do the independent studies,
every
right?
bill comes up, it tells you how long it's going to take to, break even and make an assumption. But here, it's all done in an office.
But shouldn't we have that? Do you think like structurally that would be like a good idea?
It would be a great idea,
right?
And it would have to be independent.
Right. It's almost like the OPA is operating, right? They analyze everything externally to a degree. But
the OPA's office is to catch people in bad behavior, which is okay. But the job of a legislative budget office would be to impartially analyze the economic impact of legislation.
And then you could have competing views, right? You could have a couple, right?
You should, and both parties or whomever can assign, and then that becomes a permanent arm on its own. It doesn't change when the control of the legislature changes.
Well, I'll speak to that, and the reason why I'm in a position where I'm pulling data insights is because I'm from a place where I've cared about like accurate cataloging and characterization of data, and so we've been onboarding real estate data in that way for a long time, and that's been the baseline for our success. But what I've seen is the government doesn't have a baseline of any records at that level, and I also see the government. One of the things we talk about is procurement, and procurement being an issue. And part of the reason is because people don't know what they're buying. And so there's not even when I'm ideating from an agency the product that I need, some vendor comes in, a local preference vendor specifically, who's touting some solution that they're aligned with and selling me on it through this proposal. But I don't have the background to accurately vet the proposal and see if it's the best solution. And does that background exist in GSA? I mean, maybe to a general degree, but what if definitely not to the degree required to spec a technology product. And so everything's becoming technology. So I just see these solutions being preferred, and we're getting to this place where it's a massive logjam. Nobody knows what they're doing, and there's no expertise. So what you speak to there, some storehouse of expertise that's independent, is really needed.
It is. And of course, we have AI, and we have, and so what we have is my AI is better than your AI.
Fair.
And you have competing reports that are aggregated on other reports. And, it's a real mess.
Well, Dr. Underwood, I think AI is running the government right now, right?
Yeah.
I would be surprised.
Can't be any worse.
No.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. All of these people are my friends.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why we're talking, right? Is because again, the messaging is it's pretty bad here for most people, and it's gonna get worse.
Yeah. So the economic situation, obviously, there's a great, divergence of wealth, and people are, living, in multiple family dwellings because they can't afford to get their own place. All of those things are multiplying and multiplying, and the remedies for all those are not central to the problem. They're, usually just getting more federal funds to kind of
Look externally.
give people, and again, you're not really solving any problems.
And it's all band-aids. It's not, I mean, all is the notion is there for sustainability, but it's difficult to carry those threads, administration, year to year, funding source to funding
I
source.
mean, look, like abandoned vehicles.
Mhm.
I mean, abandoned vehicles should be like really easy to solve.
Yeah.
You just tax the vehicle at the beginning, and then whoever turns it in gets that money. But we can't keep that in a lockbox. We can't do anything. Somebody spent the money. Somebody did something.
Right. And so I guess where we're at is we're doing it to ourselves. Is that a fair statement?
Well, we're limiting our vision of ourselves. I think that's it. And so by limiting our vision, we end up fighting amongst each other, rather and for more inconsequential things.
Okay.
So, what are the big political struggles that are occurring now? Have almost nothing to do with the quality of life or access to health care or improvements of education. They're just, I look good doing this. I'm going to visit this. I'm going to inspect this. I'm on top of it, kind of thinking. And, I've been there.
Fair enough.
I've done some of that myself, but it's just, it's like, they're not really getting at the nub of the issue, because part of it is it's difficult. It's very difficult to think about. But, independent, autonomous, if there was a PCIS for the economy,
Right.
you
Well,
know,
that's what we're trying to be, Doctor.
so, you might head that up. If there was a PCIS for the economy, then you would help create those competing visions, because right now those visions don't exist. Now, we're a pain in the ass for some people, and some people just wish we wouldn't speak out. But that's essentially, we're trying to change the dynamics of the conversation. I think we've done a reasonable job of it, but as you point out, it needs data, and so you have to point to the right data. And now you expand that to the legislative output of the legislature, but the economy. What is the thinking on the economy? Who's providing that? Is it the Chamber of Commerce? I don't know how many chambers of commerce we have anymore, but no one is really providing kind of a vision.
Well, that's the thing. So everyone's telling their own story.
Yeah.
So you have the board on GVB.
Right.
They have their experience with the Japan market, Taiwan market. So, but really, and there's enough information saying that Taiwan is the thing, but you don't have the result from Taiwan coming out of it, right? Even though we're throwing incentives. But does that mean Taiwan isn't right, or does that mean you just haven't found the right mix in Taiwan? And that's where the data would tell you the story. It's like, the gold's there. We're testing for it. We just haven't found the right vein, right? It's there. It's there. The data tells us. But what happens is when it's not immediately there, everyone keeps going back to their own story.
That's right.
Right? Because I know this market. And to a degree, maybe it is like the power structures are carrying forward a little more than they should, right? The generation next hasn't really come over to take over the power structures. They're still the boomers are still kind of looming, still having those old ideas kind of coming in.
We got to get rid of those boomers.
Well, to be fair, a lot of the Generation X and the millennials have left. Yeah. There's nobody left but the boomers who have any sense to run anything, right? And then the other people who are still here, they're anxious. They're hiding. They're hiding from the choices and the hard choices and the decisions.
Yeah, well, they're hoping that the someone doesn't lower the boom on them.
Fair.
Yeah.
But you're always going to feel that the boom's going to be lowered until you take control of your situation, until you become the master of your own destiny, or at least asking the hard questions. And I appreciate you joining me in asking these hard questions.
Absolutely. I enjoy myself doing this, and we should do it again.
Yeah, no, it's been really enlightening for me, and I know when I get my legs under me after all the stuff that you've opened my eyes to, I'm going to have more follow-up questions, and I'd love to continue the conversation with you. So thanks, Dr. Underwood.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. All right.
Thank you.
That conversation felt a little dangerous in that, some of the things that he was saying are scary. detaching. He didn't say it, but the notion that we stand up to the federal powers and say we want this, that, and the in between, and stand behind that, and the notion that there's a no out there, like a line that we won't back down from, and that was probably a scary proposition before than it is now. And the reason why it maybe not as scary now is because we have the power of messaging. It doesn't matter how small you are, you can have a voice if that voice resonates, and if bad things are happening. I think sentiment will speak out. Not to say that it'll change anything. I mean, there's a whole civilization being crushed around the world, but I guess the idea is if you don't do anything, you might as well just accept your fate and get along. So I hope you continue to ask the questions that are important, and keep asking them to the point that you're satisfied, and that you join us in getting the answers to the questions that I think matter to us. And that's why I'm asking them. And we're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And I hope you join us there. And I hope you send out any questions that you have, and we'll be happy to chase them down here on Data Points. Thank you.